The real security here is not defeating the enemy ballistic missiles as they move into their terminal phase over their targets. The real way to do this is to destroy the missile launchers inside Iran, so that there are a lot of extra missiles lying around and no place for them to be launched from. That's another way to look at how you approach the threat that Iran is posing.
Welcome back to Clips News. Today, we're diving into a high-stakes CNN report that exposes a growing rift inside the Pentagon over U.S. strategy toward Iran. According to internal sources, President Trump's top military officer, chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, General Dan Caine, has been holding urgent, private meetings with key cabinet members, including the Vice President, Secretary of State, and CIA Director. His message? The United States has hit a military dead end and desperately needs an off-ramp from the conflict with Iran. General Caine warns that relying solely on air power will not force Iran to capitulate, and escalating the campaign could severely backfire. In this video, CNN brings on two heavy-hitting foreign policy voices to break down what this means: former Deputy Director of National Intelligence Beth Sanner and former National Security Advisor Ambassador John Bolton. Beth Sanner gives a candid assessment of the military's predicament, pointing out that an aerial campaign alone can't win this war, and that critical U.S. supplies, particularly standoff munitions and high-end air defense interceptors like Patriot missiles, are running dangerously low. She cautions that Iran has a high risk tolerance, and U.S. adversaries like Russia and China are actively watching our stockpiles deplete. On the flip side, John Bolton offers a fiery critique of the administration's direction. He argues that looking for an off-ramp right now is a huge mistake that leaves a battered Iranian regime in a position of power. Rather than negotiating with a fractured government, Bolton insists the U.S. should double down on economic blockades and target missile launchers directly inside Iran before the threat grows even worse. It's a fascinating look at the clash between military pragmatism and hardline strategy. Let's jump right into the analysis.
As sources say, President Trump's top general, Dan Caine, who is the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, has privately made clear to top Trump advisors that he believes the United States needs to find an off-ramp from the Iran war. Over the last few weeks, our sources say that General Caine has met key cabinet officials, including the CIA director, the Secretary of State, and the Vice President, warning that escalating this conflict could backfire and that the president's aerial campaign won't be enough to make Iran capitulate, something General Caine brought up during a hearing last month.
I think academically, as you look across the totality of history, air power's got limits, and we always have to be mindful of those.
Joining me tonight is Beth Sanner, who is the former Deputy Director of National Intelligence. And Beth, when you hear this reporting about what General Caine is reportedly saying to Trump advisors about an off-ramp, what does that sound like to you?
I think it's, an accurate portrayal of the conundrum that they're in. And I think that the president actually probably feels that way some of the time, too. But then he's ready to escalate. And I think what General Caine is really clearly articulating in this reporting is that there is no military solution alone to this problem. And therefore, given all the expenditures of munitions, et cetera, we need to find a way out. But finding that way out is the big challenge.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, they've been asking for creative solutions to punish Iran, as we reported earlier. But, our colleagues also say that Caine thinks this war has reached a crossroads. You believe that's another way to state, that the United States is at a dead end, basically.
Yeah. I mean, because you can't just keep doing the same thing over and over again and expecting a different result, right? That's the definition of insanity, as they say. So I think that this is what the military folks are saying right now. And so crossroads, yeah, we have a crossroads in terms of a decision to make. But I think that it means that the military approach to this war has reached the, point of no further progress can be made. And so I call that, it's a dead end for this military approach. So we have to figure out how do we switch gears. And I think the primary problem there is that Iran is playing hardball, and they seem to have a higher risk tolerance than we do.
Well, and obviously, they got bombed for 2 weeks straight. In terms of munitions here. The pattern that we've seen play out is outlets report that munitions are low and that people are worried about it. The Pentagon, sometimes Hegseth himself, denies that. But then the president himself says people who leak that information are going to be prosecuted, which would seem to say that it's true. When you hear that, and Iran hears that, what do you think their takeaway is?
I think Iran has a pretty good sense of what our munitions, especially our air defense stockpile, is based on the responses to their incoming. And they also have help from Russia and China, who are, doing overhead imagery and making their own calculations. That's their job. As our adversaries. That's what their military does. So even though I understand totally why the president is upset by these leaks because it makes us look weak, I think our adversaries know a lot more than what the U.S. press knows about the status of our stockpile. But I think also he did say publicly that some of our supplies are tight. Right? He used that word, but we have plenty of munitions in order to conduct this war. And I think that both of those things are true. We have plenty of glide bombs and dumb bombs and even, bombs that are, more high end, but you have to get close. Our standoff munitions, the ones that you use from far away, from a safer distance, those are the ones that are running very short. And then our air defenses. And he talks about we are running out of exquisite things. Well, we have no alternative on air defenses to the exquisite air defenses. There is only one set of air defenses, and we're running extremely low on that. Our Gulf allies are running low on that, and Ukraine seems to be plumb out. And, so when I look ahead at this, Caitlin, I'm very worried.
Let's talk about the major report revealing that President Trump's top military officer, chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, General Dan Caine, is actively seeking an off-ramp from the war in Iran. Right from the opening second, CNN breaks news that hits like a thunderbolt across Washington and the Pentagon. General Caine has been privately warning top cabinet members, including the Vice President, Secretary of State, and CIA Director, that the U.S. strategy has hit a critical junction. The core issue? Relying purely on air power and aerial bombardment simply isn't going to force Iran to capitulate. Caine is essentially stating the uncomfortable truth that airstrikes alone have real, hard limits, and continuing to escalate without a clear diplomatic or strategic pivot could severely backfire. What makes this segment so compelling is the stark reality check it gives to Washington's political leadership. General Caine isn't just offering an opinion, he's bringing military math to the table. Air defense stockpiles and standoff precision munitions are running dangerously low, and doubling down on airstrikes without a ground footprint or diplomatic exit strategy puts American forces and regional allies at risk. By framing this as a search for an off-ramp, the military leadership is signaling that the current strategy has reached a dead end. Instead of repeating the same tactical moves and expecting a different outcome, the Pentagon is urging the administration to find a way to switch gears, de-escalate, and secure a political victory before the conflict spirals out of control. It's a classic high-stakes collision between military reality and strategic ambition.
Ambassador Bolton, this news about looking for an off-ramp, is that what is needed right now?
Well, I'd be cautious about exactly what Caine is looking for. He may just be looking for alternatives to the utter vacuum in strategy that we now see. That the on-again, off-again ceasefire, memorandum of understanding, threats of retaliation have done nothing for the past several months to advance whatever Trump's objective is, which still has not been made clear. I think that there is a route here that Trump could follow. He doesn't seem to be interested in it, but I would keep the blockade against Iran and use force if necessary to open the Gulf Arab side of the Strait of Hormuz to let Gulf Arab oil out. I think that's doable. I think trying to negotiate with the government of Iran is fruitless because I don't think there is a functioning government of Iran that can give a commitment that's worth anything. So in that circumstance, looking for an off-ramp really requires political direction. It's not a military call as such.
Yeah, you've said that in an op-ed in the Washington Post. You talk a little bit about that, that Iran, you say, is so fractured that the people the Trump team is negotiating with may not actually have the power to deliver a deal. I mean, how does the U.S. navigate that?
Well, I don't think you do navigate it. It's a question of deciding what your objective is. And if anybody thinks that the Revolutionary Guard in Iran is looking for compromise, the only thing they're looking for, and the reason they're happy to go with this idea of a partial opening of the strait, is to get Iranian oil out into global markets and get revenue coming in so that they can pay the Quds Force, they can pay the Besieged militia, they can pay their other components. That's an argument to keep the blockade in place. I think we've got extraordinary economic pressure that we can apply during the time when I hope the Pentagon is doing everything it can to increase production and availability of missile defense systems. There's a question here to look at some point, which is how is it over the last 5 years nobody thought of this before? But in the meantime, I think it's a mistake to try and walk away from this and leave Iran in a superior political position. The raids that we conducted in March and April did enormous damage to Iran's military-industrial complex. It's going to take them years to repair the damage. So why we're willing to give a really battered regime like that hegemony over the Strait of Hormuz, I do not understand.
What are the options, though, when you're talking about munitions being where they are? We're talking about off-ramps, or whether you talk about alternatives here. CNN reporting has the military going through nearly 80% of its THAAD inventory and 50% of its Patriots. How much does that limit what Trump can do here?
Right here at 4:39, host Caitlin Collins turns to Ambassador John Bolton and asks point blank whether looking for an off-ramp is the right move. Bolton wastes no time throwing cold water on the idea. He warns that we need to be extremely cautious about what General Caine is actually looking for, arguing that this search for an exit isn't a brilliant tactical shift. It's just a desperate attempt to deal with an utter vacuum in White House strategy. He slams the current approach of on-again, off-again ceasefires, memoranda of understanding, and empty threats of retaliation, pointing out that months of this back and forth have accomplished absolutely nothing to advance clear American objectives. Rather than backing down, Bolton lays out his own aggressive playbook. He insists on keeping a strict economic blockade on Iran and using military force to keep the Strait of Hormuz open for Gulf Arab oil, calling negotiating with Tehran completely fruitless because there isn't even a functioning government in Iran that can hold up its end of a deal. Referring to his recent Washington Post op-ed, Bolton explains that the Iranian regime, specifically the Revolutionary Guard, isn't interested in compromise. They only want partial openings to sell oil, get revenue, and fund their proxy militias, which is why giving them breathing room now is a massive mistake. He reminds viewers that U.S. strikes in March and April inflicted devastating damage on Iran's military-industrial complex that will take years to repair. So why, he asks, would Washington hand a battered regime political control over the region now? When Caitlin Collins pushes back with CNN's reporting that the U.S. military has burned through 80% of its key munitions inventory and half of its Patriot air defense missiles, Bolton completely flips the script. He argues that the real way to secure the skies isn't sitting back and firing expensive Patriot interceptors at incoming missiles. It's going on offense and destroying the missile launchers inside Iran before they can ever be fired. Bolton closes with a grim warning. If Washington backs out now and allows this regime to remain in power, it's only a matter of time before the threat grows far worse, next time with nuclear-armed ballistic missiles.
Well, I'd like to know more about exactly what inventory we're talking about, whether that means worldwide or there are other possibilities to divert Patriots from other locations where they're not needed at the moment. That's not a happy alternative. But remember, the real security here is not defeating the enemy ballistic missiles as they move into their terminal phase over their targets. The real way to do this is to destroy the missile launchers inside Iran, so that there are a lot of extra missiles lying around and no place for them to be launched from. That's another way to look at how you approach the threat that Iran is posing. And remember, if this threat is allowed to remain in power, which is the direction Trump is moving in, it is simply a matter of time before the threat grows worse, not only from ballistic missiles with conventional weapons, but the next time possibly ballistic missiles with nuclear weapons.
Host Caitlin Collins pivots to the core dilemma. asking what other real options the U.S. has when critical munitions are running dangerously low. She brings up CNN's internal reporting, revealing that the U.S. military has already burned through nearly 80% of its key munitions inventory and half of its Patriot air defense interceptors. Right here at 7:55, Collins puts the question point-blank to Ambassador Bolton. How much do these depleted stockpiles actually limit President Trump's options on the ground and in the air? Bolton immediately questions the inventory numbers, asking whether those stats represent global stockpiles or just regional supplies, suggesting the U.S. could potentially divert Patriot systems from other parts of the world, even if it's an undesirable trade-off. He then offers an aggressive tactical alternative to intercepting incoming strikes. Instead of sitting back and waiting to shoot down ballistic missiles in midair using expensive Patriot interceptors, the U.S. should pivot its option to destroying the missile launchers inside Iran before they can ever fire. Bolton wraps up his argument with a sharp warning, stating that doing nothing or backing out now leaves the threat intact, making it only a matter of time before Iran upgrades from conventional ballistic missiles to nuclear capabilities. That brings us to the end of our deep dive into this high-stakes Pentagon debate. Thank you so much for watching. If you found this breakdown helpful, make sure to hit that like button, leave your thoughts in the comments below, and subscribe to the channel for more daily political and national security analysis.